I used to believe the forest had nothing left to offer me. Just snow, silence, and memories I couldn't outrun. But one night, as winter crept down Pine Ridge, I heard a sound that didn't belong. A low, broken howl cutting through the fog. And something inside me shifted. Following it, I found him. A small creature, barely breathing, tucked beneath the roots of an old pine. A child. A Bigfoot, wounded, terrified. Not from pain, but from something darker, chasing him. Before I could react, the wolves came. Not one, not two. A pack, ruthless and fast. Instinct told me to walk away. Training told me to kill. But I didn't. Well, I stayed. I buried his mother with my own hands. A massive, broken creature who still shielded her son with her dying breath. I built a shelter. I kept them warm. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. But the wild doesn't forget. The wolves returned, for blood this time. And when I fell, he came back for me. Not alone. From the mist stepped a being I can't explain. Towering, timeless. Not a beast, not a myth. He didn't growl. He offered me an oak branch. That moment changed everything. Not just between me and them, but inside me. If you think stories about Bigfoot are about monsters, you haven't heard mine. 2:03 a.m. I remember that exact number because it was glowing red on the old digital clock by my cot. The kind with the dull hum and the blinking colon in the middle. That sound woke me up sometimes. But not that night. That night, it was a howl. Not the kind that rises and fades like a coyote in heat. No. This was long, drawn out, almost mournful. It came from somewhere deep in the woods, pulled low through the fog like a bow across old shallow strings. It didn't belong to any animal I knew, and I've hunted damn near everything in this county. I sat up slowly, the chill biting through the wool blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The fire in the stove had gone out hours ago. Ash now. The cabin was dark, but the moon pushed through the pine slats in pale streaks across the floorboards. Outside, the wind rattled the tin roof like fingers tapping on bone. Not hard, just enough. I reached for my boots. The laces were stiff with mud. On the wall above them, there she was. My daughter's face, caught forever in that faded photo. Laughing with a dandelion crown on her head. Emma. I paused. Just long enough to touch the edge of the frame. Then I grabbed the rifle. I don't go out after dark anymore unless I have to. Not since the war, but something about that call. It wasn't just wild. It felt wrong. Not evil. Not yet. But not right either. Something out of place. I opened the cabin door and the fog slid in like breath. Thick. Cold. Alive. I moved slow, boots crunching over frost-bitten leaves. I knew these woods. I've hunted them since I was 12. But that night, they didn't feel like mine. They felt borrowed. Like something was letting me walk through just for now. 30 yards out, by the edge of the old ridge trail, I spotted it. A footprint. It was sunk deep in the mud. Fresh, still holding water, and big, bigger than my boot by a full 3 inches. Toes. 5. Spread apart like a man's, but thicker. Heavier. I crouched, touched the edge. The soil was soft, still warm near the center, like it hadn't cooled yet. Whatever made that mark wasn't running. Whatever made that mark wasn't running. It was walking, calm, like it had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world to get there. Then the wind picked up again, a low moan through the trees. But it wasn't just the wind. There was something under it, like words you couldn't quite hear. Whispers. The oak leaves above me spun in tight circles. I've seen that before. Animals sense things before we do. Storms, quakes, or something else. I moved along the trail, slow and steady, scanning the path ahead. Then I saw it. A pine, thick, at least 30 years old. Snapped clean at the middle. Not rotted, not wind-felled, broken. Like someone had taken both hands and just snapped it. Splinters splayed like ribs at a crash site. That's when I knew I wasn't alone. My skin went cold. The kind of cold that's not from the air. I turned slowly. Heart picking up beat by beat, breath tight in my throat. Then I saw them. Eyes, far off, between the trees, low, steady, glowing faint gold like lantern glass in the dark. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. I raised my rifle. Took one quiet step back, and they vanished, gone. Not a crack of branch, not a footfall. Just there for a while, maybe minutes. Could have been longer. Trying to hear past the pounding in my ears. Every branch looked like a figure. Every sound felt sharper than it should. Eventually, I lowered the rifle. There was no chase to give. But I couldn't turn back either. Not yet. I moved toward the broken pine, knelt beside it. There was something in the soil, like a trail. A faint drag, maybe from a limb. Or a body. Not blood, not yet. Just disturbed ground, freshly turned. My hand hovered above it, and that's when it hit me. Not fear. I've known fear. In combat. In hospitals. At my daughter's bedside. This was something else. It was longing. A deep ache behind the ribs, like something lost had passed through here and left behind the echo of what could have been. Something ancient. Something grieving. I couldn't explain it then, and I still can't. But I know what I felt, and I know something was watching me long before I ever stepped out of that cabin. The forest was holding its breath, waiting, and so was I. It was still early, the kind of early where the fog clings low to the roots and the air forgets how to move. I hadn't gone back to sleep after what happened with the eyes in the woods. I just sat there, in that cold cabin, with the rifle across my lap and the weight of something nameless pressing down on my chest. Around 5:30, I made coffee. Burnt it a little. Didn't matter. I poured it black. Swallowed it hotter than I should have and waited for daylight to mean something again. But it didn't. I headed out not long after sunrise. The forest was soaked in that pale silver light that makes everything look soft, but not safe. The kind of light that blurs the edges. You can't trust what you see in it, but it lures you forward anyway. I followed the trail back to the broken pine. Same footprint. Still fresh. No new tracks. But something in my gut told me it hadn't gone far. I started pushing deeper. Past the ridge. Down where the trees get thick and start leaning over each other like they're whispering secrets. I wasn't hunting anymore. Not in the usual sense. This wasn't about meat or pelts. It was something else entirely, and I didn't have a name for it yet. About 2 miles in, near an old maple hollowed out at the base, I heard a noise. Not loud, just soft movement. A shuffling, like something trying hard not to be heard. I slowed my breath, stepped off the trail, lowered myself behind a log. I waited. That's when I saw it. Tucked under a tangle of roots and fallen leaves was a shape, curled in tight. Small, but not small enough to be nothing. At first I thought maybe a bear cub. But no, too long in the arms. Shoulders narrow, chest rising fast like something panicked. Then it looked at me, eyes locked, and everything else fell away. There was no growl, no hiss, no teeth bared. Just eyes big, wide, shaking. But not wild, not yet. They were asking me something, not in words, not in the way you or I would, but clear as if it had spoken out loud. Can I trust you? I didn't move, not for a long moment. Just watched. Let it breathe. Let it decide. Then I crouched slowly, letting my rifle hang by my side, not aiming, not threatening. The creature? No, not creature. The creature? No, not creature. The young one? The cub. It didn't flinch. It didn't run. Its fur was thick, but matted in places. Dried blood around its ribs. Scratches all over. One of its hands was swollen at the knuckles like it had been fighting something it had no chance of beating. It blinked at me. Once. Then lowered its head. I took that as permission. I pulled the hunting knife from my belt, flipped it to catch the light, and angled the blade down. I didn't mean to scare it. It just helped me see better in the shadows. When the sunlight hit the fur on its shoulder, it shimmered in a way I can't explain. Like oil slicks on water. Not just brown, not just black. Hints of silver and copper, almost too faint to notice. It was beautiful, broken, but beautiful. I stepped closer. One hand stretched out slow, palm up. I said nothing. Just let the moment be what it was. That's when the first growl came. Low. Behind me. I turned fast. 2 wolves, broad-shouldered, lean-muscled, eyes bright and hungry. They weren't howling. They weren't warning me off. They were closing in. I shifted my weight, lifted the rifle, cursed under my breath. Then another shape to the left. Then one more. 6 in total. Gray and black and hungry. Not a pack that was passing through. Not curious. They were hunting, and we were the softest meat in the forest. I stepped in front of the cub. It didn't move, didn't hide, just sat there behind me like it had already made peace with what was coming, like it knew it wouldn't make it. And still, it didn't look at the wolves. It looked at me. Not begging, not pleading. Not pleading, just asking me not to die for it. I fired the first shot, missed on purpose. The wolves flinched, paused, but didn't retreat. They split, circling. I moved backward, trying to keep the cub close without letting them box me in. One lunged. I fired again, clipped its ear. It yelped, rolled, but kept coming. Teeth flashing, eyes locked. They were testing me. Another one came in from the right. I swung the rifle around, too slow. The cub moved, fast, desperate. It didn't attack. It grabbed my coat, pulled, yanked with all the strength it had left, dragging me off balance down into the leaves. I landed hard, shoulder crunching into a root. Gun slid out of reach, and then it pulled again, tugging me toward a thicket. There was something beneath the leaves. A mound, a hollow. We slipped down into it as another wolf lunged and missed, jaws snapping inches from my boot. I rolled, kicked out, dragged the cub in with me. We landed in the dark, not just shadows, real dark. Damp earth. Roots like fingers. The air smelled like old blood. I reached for the flashlight on my belt, flicked it on, and she was there, lying on her side. Massive, covered in blood, breathing shallow, like a furnace almost out of heat. Her eyes open, just a slit. She looked at the cub, then at me. Didn't growl. Didn't scream. She groaned once. A sound like wind through canyon rock. Then she tried to rise. Couldn't. Collapsed. But still pushed forward. Still used her body to block the entrance. Still curled just enough to shield her young. I stared, frozen, not in fear, but because in those tired, pain-glazed eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. The same look my wife gave Emma the night before she passed. A kind of love that burns through everything else. A kind of love that doesn't ask to be understood. I lowered the flashlight, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a hunter. I felt like a witness. The ground turned red before I even felt the pain. It sprayed sideways across the roots like paint, warm and too fast. I didn't know it was mine at first. I just heard the crunch behind me, spun with the rifle, and then a flash of gray slammed into my shoulder like a truck. My knees buckled, and I went down hard, cheek dragging across pine needles slick with morning dew. My ears rang. My breath stuttered. I barely got the barrel up before another one lunged, fired blind. A yelp. Something thudded beside me. I rolled. The wolves had come back. Not for the cub this time. For me. They moved like smoke. Quiet. Strategic. They didn't growl or posture. They meant to kill. And fast. The cub shrieked behind me. Not a cry of fear, but anger. It scrambled across the dirt, fists slamming the ground in a kind of frantic rhythm. I saw it grab a rock. It didn't throw it, just clutched it. Trembling, teeth bared, too small to do anything but still trying. I got one shot off at the next wolf, took out a front leg. It shrieked and collapsed, spinning in the dirt. I rolled onto my side, tried to sit up. My left shoulder burned like it was on fire. The bite was deep, muscle torn. I couldn't lift the arm. The stock of the rifle slipped in my grip. Useless now. The cub was screaming again. Louder. It wasn't words. But there was something in it. Something human enough to break me wide open. Another wolf closed in. Low and slow. Testing. I grabbed a branch. Swung. Missed. It snapped its teeth an inch from my face. And then the cub moved. Fast. Not toward the wolf. Toward me. Grabbed my coat again. Yanked hard. The same way it had back at the den. It dragged me. With one arm, that little thing pulled me across the dirt. Step by step. Toward the trees. That's when I saw where we were headed. A gnarled old tree. Black bark. Roots twisted up like veins. And behind it, just visible, was a patch of ground that didn't match the rest. It looked soft, disturbed. A low mound pressed up like something had been buried or waiting underneath. The cub didn't stop. It pulled me to that spot, then let go, dropped to its knees, and started digging, wild, desperate. Hands flinging dirt, ripping up moss and roots like it knew something had to come out now or everything was over. Then the mound moved. A hand rose. Thick. Covered in blood. Fingers curled like it couldn't quite remember how to grasp. The cub cried out again, but this time, there was something else. Relief, pain, hope. All mixed together in one broken sound. The rest of her came next, crawling. No strength in her legs, just dragging her weight forward by her arms, every motion tearing more blood from her side. She was huge, not in a monstrous way. In a way that made the earth feel smaller around her. Her fur was soaked in blood and mud. Her mouth opened, but no roar came out. Just a groan, deep, raw, like something ancient remembering how to hurt. She saw me first, then the wolves, and she pushed forward. Didn't run, couldn't. But every ounce of her being bent into that crawl, toward the cub, toward me, toward whatever danger she had sensed through the dirt. I turned my head. The wolves had stopped, not retreating, just frozen, watching, waiting. And she rose, not to full height, just enough to shield the cub. Her arms wrapped around him, not to smother, but to block. Her eyes flicked to me, barely open, filled with something I couldn't name. Then she growled. That was enough. Backed off, one at a time. They didn't run. They just left. Vanished into the trees the way they came. Silent, I collapsed back, breathing heavy, watching blood soak through the fabric of my coat. The cub curled into her chest, shaking. Not crying, just small, and tired, and alive. She tried to lift a hand toward him. Couldn't make it far. It dropped halfway. But he reached up and touched her fingers. That's when I understood. She hadn't come to fight. She came to die next to him, but not before shielding us both. I tried to sit up, pain screaming down my spine. I crawled closer. Not too close. just enough to show her I meant no harm. She looked at me one last time, and in that look, I saw her say goodbye. Then her breath stopped. No noise, no drama, just stillness. The cub didn't scream, didn't thrash. He just curled tighter, pressed his face into her chest and waited for something that wasn't coming back. And me, I sat there, one arm bleeding, covered in dirt, holding my breath like it would somehow hold the moment in place. I wasn't scared anymore. I was hollow, because somehow, in that brief second, through the fog and the dirt and the blood, I'd seen Emma's eyes again, and they were staring back at me from the face of something the world refuses to believe is real. But I knew, and I stayed. I didn't leave. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when the rain came down in sheets cold enough to cut bone. I stayed. Something in me refused to go. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the cub, curled beside her like he could will her back if he just didn't move. Or maybe it was the silence. That kind of silence that only exists in the space after a life leaves a body. Sacred, whitey, like the whole forest knew she was gone and didn't dare fill the void she left behind. I built a shelter. Nothing fancy. Just a tarp strung low between two trees, some branches stacked tight to hold off the wind. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw hers. Not wild, not beast. Just a mother who gave everything she had so that her child wouldn't die alone. I'd seen that kind of look before. In hospital rooms, in foxholes. I'd seen it on my wife's face the night before the tumor took her. Same quiet fire. The cub didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His movements were clear enough. He stayed close, but not too close. Gave me space, but never left her side. He watched me. Always watched me, with eyes too old for a creature that small. Like he was still deciding whether I belonged in that clearing or not. I unpacked the old med kit from my rucksack. The same one I hadn't touched since Emma died. Half the supplies were expired, but the gauze and alcohol were still good. I dug into the side pouch and pulled out a battered plastic tin. The one with her name scratched into the lid in pink Sharpie. She used to keep glitter band-aids and stickers in it. Now it held a roll of tape and some iodine. I cleaned my shoulder the best I could, gritting my teeth through the sting. The bite wasn't deep enough to kill, but it throbbed like hell, and would take weeks to close right. Then I looked over at him. His side, scraped raw. One ankle swelling up purple beneath the fur. Gash across his forearm already crusting dark. I didn't ask. Just moved slow, held up the gauze, and waited. He flinched, then stilled. Let me touch him. Let me clean him. He didn't cry. He didn't fight. He just trembled, barely, like something inside him was trying to hold on to the last thread of control. When I was done, I backed away, gave him space to breathe, and he just sat there, breathing slow, not looking at me. That night, the rain let up just long enough for the wind to pick up, cold and dry. The kind that cuts across your neck and slips into your collar. I kept the fire low. The smoke curled sideways, slow and ghost-like, licking the air but never rising. She still lay there, still heavy, like a monument carved from the forest itself. Even in death she felt immovable. He made sounds sometimes, low, not words, not quite. Something between a hum and a whisper, almost like singing. He did it when he curled up beside her. Long notes rising and falling like wind through canyon walls. I didn't understand them, but I didn't need to. It wasn't for me. The second night I woke to the feeling of eyes on me. He was standing near the fire, just beyond the light, watching, breathing quiet. I didn't move. Just looked at him, waited. He stepped forward, slow, like he wasn't sure yet. Then he pointed, not to me, to my chest, then to hers, then to hers. He didn't say anything, but I knew what he meant. This connection between us wasn't chance. It was survival. He walked past me then, crouched near her body, and for the first time since she died, he reached out and placed one hand on her face. Just a touch. Then he dropped to his knees and laid his head against her collarbone. He didn't make a sound, didn't need to. By the fourth day, the scent of her body had begun to change. The forest around us was waking up to it. I saw shapes moving at the tree line. Scavengers. Curious ones. But none dared cross into the clearing. Something about her presence, even in death, kept them at bay. Still, I knew it wouldn't last. We couldn't stay like this. So I made a decision. I dug. The ground was hard. Roots thick, stones everywhere. But I dug. With my good arm, with sticks, with my hands. It took hours. Maybe all day. I lost track. Sweat mixed with blood. My vision blurred. When I finished, I turned to him. He didn't speak, just looked at me. Then looked at her. Together, we moved her. She was heavier than anything I'd ever lifted. Not just in weight. In what she meant. In what she was. We didn't bury a beast that day. We buried a mother, a protector, a being the world would never believe in. But I did. After we laid her down, I covered her with pine branches first, then soil, then leaves. The cub placed small stones on top, one by one. In silence, I stood at the foot of the grave. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything, but I pulled a knife from my belt, walked to the nearest tree, a thick old oak with bark like armor, and carved something into it. 3 slashes, intersecting. The same symbol the cub wore around his neck. I didn't know what it meant, but I figured it should mark this place. By the time the sun set, the cub had curled up beneath the tree, right above where she lay. I sat close, watching the shadows shift, listening to the hum of night settle in. That was when something in me changed. I didn't feel like a hunter anymore. I didn't feel like a soldier, or a father, or a man. I felt like a witness to something sacred, and I stayed. I buried her under the oak, same tree I carved that symbol into, the one with bark thick like old armor and branches that reached up like it had something to say to God. I didn't speak when I lowered her down. Didn't feel like words would land right anyway. The forest already knew, and so did the boy. He stood beside me, silent, holding a stone in each hand like he couldn't decide which one to leave behind. His breathing was calm, but his shoulders, they never stopped shaking, not big tremors. Just a ripple that stayed there beneath the surface, like his body hadn't caught up with what had happened. Or maybe it had, and that's what breaking looked like when you didn't know how to cry. I knelt beside the grave and pressed my palm into the dirt, still soft, still warm. Then I laid the stones he picked out on top, one flat, one round, then a third one shaped like a heart if you squinted, even though I don't believe in signs much. Still, it felt right. He stepped forward and set the last one down himself. The one with the notch that looked like a claw mark across the middle. I nodded. He didn't look up. Just knelt, hands still in the dirt, like he needed to feel the last trace of her beneath his skin before the earth took her for good. I stayed like that for a long while. Let the light shift across the clearing. Let the wind pull at the back of my coat and whisper through the branches above us. The kind of wind that only shows up when something's gone. Later that morning, I walked a few miles back toward the cabin. My shoulder had stopped bleeding, but it burned under the bandages. I figured I'd grab some more supplies, patch things properly, maybe leave a radio message for Cora if the tower was still clear. Let someone know I was still breathing. She showed up before I could. I heard her boots before I saw her, crunching over gravel like she didn't care about noise. That was her way. No secrets. Just walked through the woods like the whole damn forest owed her something. Ranger Cora Whitlock. Tough as nails. Heart twice the size she let people see. We went way back. Years of crossed paths, shared fires, lost hunts, and the kind of silence only two broken people can share without needing to fill. She didn't smile when she saw me. Didn't frown either. Just looked me up and down and said, "Heard shots. Thought maybe you were dead." I said nothing. Just looked past her toward the trail that led back to the oak. "You alone out here?" she asked. "No." Her eyes narrowed. "Human?" I shook my head. Slowly, she waited. I didn't explain, not yet. Just started walking back toward the clearing. She followed. Always did. When we reached the grave, she didn't ask right away. She just stopped at the edge. Looked down. Took in the shape of the mound, the stones, the symbols on the bark. I watched her chest rise and fall. Watched the questions gather in her throat like a storm that couldn't quite let go. She turned to me, and for a second, her voice dropped low, softer than I'd ever heard it. "What did you bury?" I looked her straight in the eye. Not an animal, not a person, but a mother. She didn't ask again. She didn't need to. We stood there a while longer. The three of us, me, her, and the boy. Though he stayed back in the trees, barely visible through the leaves. Watching. Like always. Then, just like that, he was gone. No sound. No farewell. Just vanished into the undergrowth. I stepped toward where he'd been. Saw something on the stone near the grave. The leather cord from around his neck. Folded. Placed careful, not dropped. The symbol on it. 3 slashes. Still scratched deep in the middle. I picked it up and turned it over in my palm. It was warm. Still warm. Cora stepped closer and saw it too. She didn't ask. Just stood there and watched me. But I saw her eyes change. Something in them softened. Maybe for me. Maybe for him. Maybe for something bigger than both of us. And then she cried. Not loudly. Not like a storm. Just tears. Slow and private. Tracing the lines of a face that hadn't let much out in a long, long time. She turned away before I could say anything. Wiped her face with the back of her sleeve and whispered, "You look different." I feel different. I didn't chase the boy. I didn't call out. I just let the forest have him back. If he needed to come again, he would. If not, this was goodbye. Back at the cabin, I hung the cord on the wall, right next to Emma's photo. The leather matched the old wood so well it felt like it had always belonged there. That night, I sat by the fire and watched the flames dance. The crackle, the shift, the soft breath of warmth against my face. I listened to the woods just beyond the walls. Quiet, breathing, waiting. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I wouldn't run. Not anymore. Because something had changed inside me out there, beneath that oak, beside that grave, with that boy. And once it changes, it doesn't change back. The wolves came back on the 6th night. Not like before. This time, they didn't stop. They didn't circle. They came straight through the brush like a hammer through glass. Sharp, loud, and without hesitation. I was inside the makeshift shelter, patching the last tear in the tarp roof when I heard the first snap of branches. Then the growl. Low, guttural, too close. I grabbed the lantern, kicked out the fire, and froze for half a second too long. The first one lunged from the side, straight through the dark. It tore into the canvas wall like it was nothing. I threw myself backward, rolled into the mud, and felt the edge of its teeth catch my boot. Not enough to break skin, but enough to drag me hard. I scrambled, kicked, found my footing just in time to slam the butt of my old Remington into its snout. It yelped, stumbled, then snarled. The others were already surrounding the camp. 6, maybe 7, bigger than the last ones, smarter. Their eyes glinted in the lantern light, yellow and hungry and unblinking. They weren't after the boy this time. They were here for me. I reached for the fire bundle I'd rigged a day earlier. Dry moss, bark, and a jar of homemade napalm I'd buried in a rusted coffee tin. Something I'd made years ago in another war, never thinking I'd need it on American soil. I struck the flare and lobbed it. The flames exploded sideways in a bloom of orange and white, licking the branches, painting the whole scene in pulsing shadows. The wolves scattered just enough for me to break through. I ran, half limping, half sliding, down toward the hollow near the stream. Mud swallowed my boots. Blood pounded in my ears. My shoulders screamed with each step. I barely made it 30 feet before one of them tackled me from behind. Its weight crushed me into the ground. The breath left my lungs in a single broken wheeze. I rolled hard, fumbled for the blade on my belt, swung it backward, caught fur and flesh. It howled, pulled away. I dragged myself to the nearest log, pressed my back to it, raised the knife, ready for the rest. And then the world stopped. A sound echoed through the trees, low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat struck in stone. It wasn't human, but it wasn't wild either. It didn't belong to the wolves. It didn't belong to me. It belonged to something older, deeper. Boom, 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 boom. I knew that rhythm, not from memory, not from experience, from instinct. It sounded like drums, but there were no drums, like bones knocking together in some distant cavern. It came from the ridge above us, rolling down the trees like a warning, like a judgment. The wolves froze, every single one of them, eyes wide, bodies locked. That's when he stepped out. The boy. He wasn't hiding anymore. He stood tall, shoulders squared, feet planted in the soft dirt. His fur caught the glow of the flames behind him, turning silver at the edges. His chest heaved, not from fear, from focus. He raised his arms, slow, steady, palms toward the sky. The sound didn't stop. It pulsed louder, faster. Every beat echoed in my ribs like it was shaking something loose inside me I didn't know was trapped. He tilted his head back, eyes closed, face pointed to the stars. And then he moved, not like a human, not like a beast, like a memory rising up from the soil. His arms swayed in small, deliberate motions. His feet shifted through the dirt in patterns too smooth to be instinct, too exact to be chance. He was performing something, a rite, a prayer, or maybe both. And wolves, they bowed, not all at once, but one by one. First the lead, then the next, until all of them had lowered their heads, tails tucked, breath still. Not out of fear, out of reverence. I watched from the mud, heart hammering against my ribs, too stunned to speak, too humbled to move. The boy didn't stop. His movements grew slower, calmer, until finally his hands dropped to his sides and he opened his eyes. Silence followed, thick, final. Then the wolves turned and walked away. Not a sprint, not a retreat, a departure, like they had been dismissed. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned to me. He didn't come close. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, deep, steady. And in that moment I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. Not because of shame, but because of awe. Then he walked away, up the ridge, back into the dark. The sound faded with him, beat by beat, until there was nothing left but wind and my own ragged breath. I sat there a long time, staring at the flames, trying to understand how the world had tilted beneath my feet. But deep down, I already knew. That boy, whatever blood ran through his veins, whatever name his kind whispered under their breath, he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was becoming something, and I had just witnessed the moment it began. The fog came down thicker than I'd ever seen it. Heavy, dense, like a living thing pressing in from all sides. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, and even then it was all just outlines and shadows that shifted if I stared too long. The trees stood like monuments, silent and tall, their branches dripping with dew that never quite hit the ground. The air held that metallic stillness. No birds, no wind, not even the crackle of leaves underfoot. Just me and the silence. And then it stopped being silent. It didn't start with footsteps. It started with the wolves. They showed up again, same pack from the night before. This time, they weren't growling. They weren't even baring teeth. They stood at the edge of the fog, eyes gleaming gold, bodies low to the ground like they were waiting for something to give them permission to breathe. I kept my back to the tree, rifle raised, but not aimed. I knew it wouldn't matter. I wasn't the center of attention anymore. Something else had arrived. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the weight of the world. Like the forest exhaled all at once, and everything inside it leaned in. Then he stepped through, not from above, not from behind, straight through the fog like it was parting just for him. Massive, towering, taller than the biggest bull I'd ever seen, covered in thick gray fur that shimmered with silver where the mist caught the light. His shoulders were wide enough to blot out the trees behind him, arms long and heavy, hands so big they looked like they could hold the moon. There were burns on his right forearm, dark scars, still red at the edges, and I couldn't tell if they were old or fresh. But it wasn't the size that stopped my breath. It was his face. There was something human in it, not in the way we'd recognize, but in the way kings used to carry their pain. Quiet, etched into every line. His eyes were deep-set, dark, unreadable. But I didn't need to read them to know he was looking straight at me. Not through me, at me. Then he moved forward. Slow, controlled. Each step deliberate. The wolves didn't move. Not one. They just lowered their heads the moment he passed, as if it wasn't their choice. As if it wasn't their choice. As if it wasn't he itself bent for him. He stopped a few feet from me, didn't speak, didn't snarl. He just stood there, between me and the pack. And I understood then. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to decide. We stood in that stillness, two shapes cut from different worlds, and for one long second, nothing moved but the fog curling around our legs. Then he reached out, not to me, to the earth. He bent, slowly, with effort like it hurt him to move, and picked up a thin branch from the ground. Oak stripped of leaves, snapped clean at one end. He held it in one hand, looked at it for a moment like it held memory, then stepped forward. I didn't flinch. He knelt, pressed the branch into the soil between us, and left it there. A gesture so simple, so quiet. I nearly missed the weight of it. But I knew. That wasn't a weapon. It was a sign. He was offering peace. Behind him, the cub stepped out. I hadn't seen him till then. He must have been following in the mist. He moved slow, eyes wide, head tilted up as he approached his father. Or maybe not father. Maybe leader. Maybe both. He stopped in front of me, lifted one hand, and laid it on my chest. Not hard. Just enough to feel the rhythm of my heart against his palm. He didn't speak. But that didn't matter. He didn't have to. His touch said everything. Thank you. Goodbye. We stood like that for just a breath more. Then he dropped his hand, turned back to the giant, and together they vanished into the fog the same way they'd arrived, quietly, with purpose. No sound, no drama, just gone. And the forest felt different after. The wolves disappeared too. Slipped into the trees like smoke. No snapping branches. No eyes watching from the brush, just me. Standing alone in the clearing, the branch still stuck in the dirt. I didn't pull it out, didn't move it. I just stood there until the sun started to bleed through the mist, until the light turned soft and gold again and the air finally remembered how to breathe. And that's when I knew the line had been drawn, not between man and beast, between understanding and fear. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't on the wrong side of it. The snow didn't come that year, not like it used to. It melted too fast, like the ground had warmed in its sleep. I stood at the edge of the tree line that morning, boots half buried in frost and mud, and felt something strange in the air. Not cold, not warm either, just still. No bird song, no crunch of squirrels in the canopy, just the creak of old trees breathing deep, and the faint echo of something having passed through. The trail up to the ridge was softer than usual. I took my time. My shoulder still ached in the cold, and the path had shifted since the last windstorm. The pine needles underfoot were soaked through, clumped in thick patches where the snow had barely clung before giving up. But the oak still stood where I left it, black bark, roots wide like a frozen river, and hanging from one of the low branches, right where her grave settled beneath the earth, was the cord. The same one he left behind. But it wasn't the same anymore. The leather was weathered now, dulled from frost and sun. But someone, no, not someone, him, had woven something into it since. Strands of silver fur braided into the leather. Not his, not hers, wolf fur. I recognized it immediately, thick and coarse and still clean. It had been taken recently, on purpose. A sign. It was an offering. I didn't touch it, just looked at it. It swung gently in the morning wind, slow and steady, like a pendulum ticking time in reverse. Peace. That was what it meant. Not just between them and me. Between what I thought I knew and what I never could imagined. I sat beneath the tree, didn't speak, didn't write anything down. Just sat there and let the earth settle around me. The snow hadn't come, but the fog had. It rolled in low and slow, curling between trunks like smoke. The kind that clings to your boots and your breath, the kind that carries weight. I remembered everything in that moment, the way she dragged herself forward with her last breath, the way he looked at me like I might be worth something, the way the old one knelt and pressed that branch into the dirt like it meant more than war or blood ever could. None of it felt real, and yet every part of it lived in my bones now, burned into muscle memory, as if I'd always known them, and it had just taken this life to remember. I was never the same after that. Didn't go back to town for weeks. Let the cabin stay quiet. Let the stove stay cold. Didn't check the traps. Didn't hunt. I didn't need to. Something in me had shifted. The hunger had turned to stillness. The radio crackled one afternoon. Cora's voice on the other end. Just static and a few words. "You're still breathing." I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the cord hanging in the window, still turning slowly in the light. I picked up the receiver. Yeah, she didn't press for more. She never did. That spring, she came up in person. Boots muddy, coat half unzipped. She stood in my doorway and looked around like she was checking for ghosts. "You ever gonna tell anybody what happened out there?" I shook my head, just enough for her to understand. She watched me for a long second, then looked out toward the trees. Thought so. She never asked again. The forest changed after that. Not in a way most people would notice, but I noticed. The trees grew in tighter, closer together. Not strangled, just protective. The deer paths got harder to follow. The wind carried new sounds, less like warning, more like memory. One night, a month later, I found a small print in the dirt just outside the cabin. Not fresh, but not old either. The 3 slashes, still there, still watching, still remembering. I didn't follow, didn't need to. I knew they were safe, and I was finally part of something I couldn't explain, but didn't have to. That night, I lit a small fire outside, sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and the sky wide and open above me, the kind of black that only comes when the moon doesn't want to be seen. I opened the notebook. Not a journal, not a story, just a place to hold what I couldn't carry anymore. I wrote the title at the top, The Silence Beneath Pine Ridge, then closed it. Didn't write another word. I didn't need to. The fire cracked. The wind moved. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because it was over, but because it mattered. And that was enough. There are places in this world where words fall quiet, where understanding doesn't come through language but through presence, where silence speaks louder than any cry. And connection isn't earned, it's offered. Out there in the stillness, beyond the edges of what we think we know, there are truths waiting to be seen. Not facts, not evidence, but truths that live in the breath between creatures, in the choice to protect rather than harm, in the shared rhythm of survival. This story, like all the stories that matter, isn't about monsters or mysteries. It's about the space between fear and compassion. It's about what happens when we stop trying to conquer the unknown and instead choose to stand with it, shoulder to shoulder, in quiet recognition. It's about grief that reshapes us, not into someone weaker, but someone more open. And about how sometimes the most powerful bond doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. We live in a world that teaches us to turn away from the strange, to categorize what we don't understand, to defend first and question later. But every now and then, life offers us a different path, one forged in empathy, in instinct, in the raw and fragile willingness to see beyond the surface. The kind of path that doesn't lead us forward or backward, but inward. The kind that leaves us changed, not because we found answers, but because we asked better questions. And maybe that's the point of it all. Not to explain every shadow or map every footstep, but to carry forward what we've felt in our bones, the quiet reverence, the ache of shared sorrow, the beauty of choosing care over conquest. In the end, what remains isn't the fear. It's the silence, the sacred stillness left behind when something extraordinary brushes up against the ordinary, then disappears without asking to be remembered, but is remembered anyway. If this story meant something to you, if it stirred something quiet and real deep down, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going together. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, raw, human, and filled with the wild unknown, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and always listen for what lives just beyond the trees.